One of the trends that we're seeing in product management is this rise of a super IC. So it's someone who, in a different day and age would have been leading a team, but because of, whatever's happening in the economy, they're not. The company is scaled back, so they're able to do a whole lot more because of AI than they could have done before. They're able to do code, which they may not have been able to do before. They're able to design things using AI that they may not have been able to do before. So you're having these people be able to go much farther down the development path than what they did previously. And I think that's fascinating because, it makes total sense. A lot of people don't want to lead people, and that's cool. And now they've got all these tools to be able to, be superpowers.
Real quick before we get into the interview. One of the first exercises I run with executive teams is mapping their business portfolio to visualize the current work in progress and how it aligns to the overall business strategy. Now, without exception, every time I run this exercise, the gap between the current state and desired state is far wider than every executive believed, hoped, or even imagined. I've put the exact template to use, how I do this, and made it free for all of you to download by following the link in the comments. Go get your copy and let me know how it goes. Now back to the show. Welcome to the UNLEARN podcast, the podcast where we explore the stories, strategies, and mindset shifts that drive real innovation and growth. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Deanna Stepner, a true trailblazer in the world of product management and people-centered leadership. As a Silicon Valley native, Deanna has spent 2 decades building leading global product teams for companies like Monster.com, Cheap Flights, which was acquired by Kayak, Salesforce, and Razorfish. Along the way, she's discovered that while launching great products is exciting, helping people launch their careers is even more rewarding. Deanna's passion for fostering talent and preparing organizations for the future shines through in her new book, Next Gen Product Management, Future-Proof Your Career. It's a must-read for anyone navigating the rapidly evolving landscape of technology, teams, and product management. Her show previously, Leading and Finding Your Voice as a Leader, was one of the most popular shows that we did in 2024. We're great to have her back again. She's going to dive into her journey about what she's learned and practical advice for product leaders as they meet these transitions of the technology changes we're facing today. So let's get started with some of those seminal moments for her as a product manager from when she began her career.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode and it greatly supports our podcast.
When I was in product management, which, started a long time ago, over 20 years ago, people kept saying, oh, you're a project manager. And I'm like, no, I'm not a project manager. I am a product manager. And I started to see that shift probably 10, 15 years ago. But in the first years of my career as a product manager, people didn't know what I did. And it sounds funny, people didn't really know what a product was. It's like, I have a company, like I worked at Monster. Monster was the company, but Monster was also the product. And so people just assumed I did something with the website, made the website appear, and magically continue to appear when people needed to use it. And, maybe there are facets of that, that hold true, but they never really thought about the capabilities or how the capabilities were created or where those ideas came from or how we thought about the user experience. It was almost like a magician, waved a wand and all this stuff appeared. And over time, people began to realize that it actually was a skill or an expertise. And I think that happened along the lines of when products and companies started to move to the cloud, because it made it easier for more companies to spin things up faster. And so you started to have more competition than you did before. So products became a differentiator. The user experience became a differentiator because there were more things to choose. And so I think that's probably when product management started to be something that people are like, oh, light bulb. I kind of get what you do. You make something better, or you make it easier to use, or you know, somehow hear me in my sleep when I say, you know, I wish this feature was there. That was definitely an aha moment for me, but it wasn't when I started my career. It was later on.
So this is a really fascinating insight, right? So for some folks out there, you know, Monster, I think it must have been one of the easily top 10 websites at the time of the web really taking off, right? A fantastic jobs board. Pretty much, I think anyone who was looking for a job, really anywhere in the globe, that was the hub that they went to start to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to hear you describe that, this idea of the project management over the product management. Like, I still remember those good old days of, you know, trying to deliver what were products, but people did think of them as projects. It was all a list of tasks, and all that really mattered was a release date and how many tasks were done by the release date. And I don't think you're right. We didn't have this language. Like, certainly things like user stories, or this is like Agile was probably even in its infancy at this point, or the notion as well as you're talking later on of cloud and iteration and fast feedback loops. Like, you know, you were lucky if you got the tasks, you know, into a bundle and out the door on a release
Great.
date, and then magic happened, as you said, you know. And I rarely remember, like many people, certainly within companies I was even working in, that would talk a lot about user experience or onboarding workflows, or it was just like, I need the thing.
Yeah.
I need this button. I need this tick on a box, you know, and the thought really wasn't there, which is fascinating. But I agree with you as well. Like, there's always these transformational changes that happen with technology that it for me, it is always about speed and iteration. As you say, from where we were in those days to cloud, which allowed much cheaper, much faster deployment, builds, iteration, better data, to, you know, the moment we're all meeting at the moment, where that efficiency is even going, you know, faster, cheaper, better again. We're leveraging more automation on top of all these great tools like cloud infrastructure. So as you're thinking now, and for me, again, it's why it's quite timely you're sharing this book around the next generation of product management. We've seen product management, as you say, sort of find a name for itself, an understanding for it. And yet I think that's all going to go out the window again with this next sort of wave that's in front of us. So what are you personally both experiencing and seeing and feel again might need to be unlearned from at a personal level as you're facing this sort of next, you know, if you say wave of this huge innovation that's happening for someone who's been through multiple waves of that? So what are some of the things that are going through your mind and what you want to help people with?
I mean, for me, it's like one step forward, two steps back.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned, like, you know, people were asking for delivery dates and the features, the capabilities that you were going to provide at that certain point of time. And that still happens. I mean, you know, the last companies that I was at, that was how, you know, the C-suite managed things. We were, you know, tasked to deliver such a feature by such a date because, you know, we were public and that's what we said we were going to do. So I think it's ironic that we know other ways to do things, but there's still this desire to be so prescriptive about what we are going to do. And so even though product management has evolved as a discipline, it's almost like the wrapping around it still has catching up to do. And I think that's fascinating because, like, one of the things in the book is, like, you know, product managers shouldn't be mini CEOs. And that's been something that's not new. But if you look at a lot of organizations, it is still maybe not said, but the expectation. And that fails to recognize the incredible value that different functions bring at different points of the product development process. And yes, you could say maybe you need, you know, someone to help guide it, but I always use like the conductor analogy or the jazz musician analogy. It's more of making sure, everything kind of happens, but you're not leading all those different facets. You've got design, which is amazing at user research and design. You've got development, who's incredible at engineering. You've got customer success, who will be there to support any customer item that comes up. I think that there's got to be this realization that you need all of those instruments to come together to really make the music sing. And companies still don't realize that, or they don't, they see it, but they still think there needs to be someone telling people what to do. And I guess that's not the world that I see as being the way forward.
Yeah, no, it's great that you're calling these things out, like I think with every evolution of any discipline, you sort of have to go through the phases, right? Like the earliest days of very much like, where's my tasks? What's the delivery date? I guess people would say very output focused, right? Just execute and get the thing delivered, because building software was pretty horrible. Like you would luckily release something maybe 3 times a year. There was like such a pressure, to get everything right, because the delay, if they missed the shipping window, is months. But again, I like this analogy, as you were saying, with cloud allowed people to do deployments smaller, more frequent. A lot of that anxiety went away, especially in the leading companies. Yeah. And they were thinking more about what is the customer experience. Are more people converting the way that we want? Yeah. They're asking more business-driven questions rather than execution-focused ones.
Another inflection point, I think, is mobile, too, because a lot of people had, computers at work. And again, I'll date myself, but they didn't necessarily have them at home. And so also having mobile devices and having applications or websites on mobile devices was a huge just opportunity for people to give you feedback anywhere, anytime. And I think that also changed how we approach development, because instead of just having one platform that you're delivering for, you've got to think about the different form factors. And again, that's where product steps in and able to help with that. And so I feel that also made it more open for people to give you different views based on their life and times, as opposed to when they happen to be sitting in front of a computer, which for a while was at work.
It's funny, you're reminding me of all these like little experiences along the way. So one of the first, what I would say, truly mobile experiences I had was building a mobile site for lastminute.com. And they were like, in the UK, they were sort of this pioneer of the hotel industry, where you could book hotels right to the last minute. They'd have the best deals, but it was very much incepted in the age of, as you say, the desktop computer. That's when they started. They had great success. They were a very well-known brand throughout Europe. At the time, it was all they had was the website, and mobile phones, as you say, were like kicking off. This sort of even experience, I remember we would like put all these mock-ups on the wall of like what the phone experience was going to look like. And so many people in the business were like, but like, why can't I see like all of these pictures and this thing that I'd use on the website and this one I use? And I'm like, well, it's a phone. Like the form factor dictates that you can only have 3 things. So what are the 3 most important things when someone is doing a search? It was really fascinating experience. And we were in London working at the time. We were right beside Leather Lane, which is a fantastic part of London for food. We used to go for the best coffee, and we would bring like these like little prototypes to phone down and like run prototype testing when we were having coffees with people who would just come in and were like, hi, we're building a product. Do you want to see it?
Yeah.
And again, it was so fascinating, again, just like watching how people would interact with the device and the prototypes. And we used to bring down like people from the company just so they could see it. And we started recording them as well, because it was just so fascinating for people to see the shift in form factor and how it impacted. And, like it was a great project, because even when we launched, like revenue doubled on mobile, like straight away. It was a huge, exciting experience to happen. But again, like the notion of product management still at that point was this idea of some exec wanted a feature, and the team, there was definitely no one on our group who had a title of product manager at that point. It was, you have a project manager, an analyst, an engineer, and a tester. And even the notion of a cross-functional team was still quite alien. We had our group in the center of this, working environment. We would sit there, we'd have canvases on the wall, and people would sort of look at us and go like, what are those people doing over there? Are they crazy?
What have they got in their coffee?
Exactly. It was great. But now you're reminding me of all these moments, right? So again, as you say, you've seen these multiple times now, right? And the moment we're currently facing is this huge ability to automate, to capture data in real time, in so many different form factors. I think this notion of niching, of just these products that are being built for such, very focused niches, and if they solve them well, people might even try and chain these. What are you sort of seeing in some of the insight you're sort of taking away, the product management, the challenges that need to sort of be overcome in that area? What are some of the thoughts there?
There's a couple things that I think are arising, and it's partly due to AI. You could say it's due to the economy or what it is, but the rise of AI has come hand in hand with a lot of layoffs. And so you see a lot of companies flattening. You see a lot of product people who used to be managing a team now doing IC work. And so one of the trends that we're seeing in product management is this rise of a super IC. So it's someone who, in a different day and age would have been leading a team, but because of, whatever's happening in the economy, they're not. The company is scaled back, so they're able to do a whole lot more because of AI than they could have done before. They're able to do code, which they may not have been able to do before. They're able to design things using AI that they may not have been able to do before. So you're having these people be able to go much farther down the development path than what they did previously. And I think that's fascinating because, it makes total sense. A lot of people don't want to lead people, and that's cool. And now they've got all these tools to be able to, be superpowers. And that I find really fascinating. And so you're seeing these companies with, 3, 4, 5 people, as you said, able to do things that, a couple of years ago would have taken a whole organization. And in those instances, you're having a product manager, you're still having, I hope a designer and an engineer, but the reach, the things that they can do is so much more powerful than what they did prior to AI. The thing that concerns me a bit, though, is you do have these companies or these groups that are saying, I just need one of you. And then we end up in this think of what I have in my head and what ChatGPT tells me is diversity. I don't think that's right. You still need multiple people to be able to bat ideas back and forth. You still need multiple people to be able to come up with new ideas, to think of things differently. And one of my concerns is that in these one person can do it all, we end up with these applications that, are very niche because the person didn't have that camaraderie to be able to think of ways that it could have benefited more people. And that to me is a little bit scary. I'm hoping that companies start to learn you do need multiple people to have that potential to scale, because otherwise your niche is going to be really narrow.
Yeah, now this is a great conversation. Yeah. There's a couple of things that I instantly start thinking about to contrast what you've said already on the show. So first of all, I really enjoy the way you're describing maybe a super IC, but people, while their teams have been reduced, they've found tools to help them be a little bit more efficient in what they're doing, or maybe just productive, whatever that might mean as well. But there's an ability to sort of create things and push them a little bit further along. I think that's a fascinating trend as well. It's one I really enjoy. Like, I can build prototypes now with tools like Bolt or whatever it might be, where I can then go to teams and say, here's what I mean. This sort of clickable thing that I can build very, very quickly. Would I put it out into the world? Maybe. It'll probably crash if more than 100 people use it, but I can do it. I still need the engineer to make it scalable, robust, and so forth. Again, you sort of alluded to this at the beginning, which is almost like the extreme, because people seem to go to the extremes with everything. This idea of the mini CEO, of the product manager sort of being this mini CEO who can run the whole thing. And then we hear this narrative now, especially coming out of people like Sam Altman and OpenAI, of these one-person unicorns, where this one person is going to be able to build this entire company and do everything just by plugging in, software and bots. They can do it all, And of course, that sounds sensational and awesome. But it's sort of, again, I feel like it's the incarnation of the mini CEO in the early days of power. Yeah. And now there's like this billion-dollar unicorn, one person who can just do everything with AI as the only person that's going to help them. For me, it feels like it's that story, like going to the extremes again in the context. So help people understand a little bit more of this, right? Because it is exciting what these tools can offer people. It can make us more efficient. We all have our favorite little mini tool stack, if you will, that we operate and work with. Giving people a little bit of an insight into what that's like. Maybe even share some of your own sort of, if you will, setup, just to give people a taster of evolution in product management. You're also going on as well as the industry.
I think I'm one of those people who I try everything. So and then
great.
use it for like a week, decide it's not me, and go on to something else. I try to build things. I'm not a coder. I'm too all over the place, but I love being able to try some of the applications, like Replit or others, where if if I follow someone, I could code, and that to me is pretty impressive. I mean, the ones that I live by is, ChatGPT and Claude. And, if I want something to be friendly, I use Claude. If I want something to be direct, I use ChatGPT. I have custom GPTs, to be able to build things. Again, like our mobile phones, or social media, I can't picture life without them. I'm going to use the word richer, but I'm also going to hold back on that because it's still wrong. I mean, you can't just take something, cut and paste and run with it. It's wrong. And so that happens with code. So as you're saying, you still need the developers to come in. If you're analyzing user feedback using Maze or something else, in the AI, there's still bumps. There's still hiccups. And so I don't see them replacing humans. And when you said that one person mini, that CEO, it made me think of at the start of the internet, there was that guy who sold pixels. And he made a lot of money doing it, but it wasn't something someone was going to do again. And so I think we're in that time where some of it is novelty because it's new, but I'm hoping we're going to move beyond it. That it would be my dream, my ideal. But in my tech stack, I use some things that I really like. The AI, as I said, with ChatGPT and with Claude, I mean, they're the big players. But then when I try to use the Notion AI, it's not there yet. And so there's things I need to think about, in regards to some of the tools that I still really like. Do I stay with them for a bit and wait for their AI to catch up? Or do I go through the process of, exporting and importing my whole entire life, which is in Notion? And that's a huge moat to try to navigate. So even though the experience isn't that great, it's still part of my tech stack just because of the moat it's created around my data. So that's something I keep in mind. The other piece is for whatever reason, I can type really fast. And so when I'm coaching people or doing user research, I can type really fast. But I love things like Jamie or like Granola that don't show up as bots in your call. But you let people know, obviously, you're recording, but they can record. And so that allows me to go deeper in my questions. It allows me to ignore my spelling errors and really have more in-depth discussions than I would before. And I think it's partly mental. When you see that record in a Zoom, people get a little bit uncomfortable
Yeah,
because it's like, I
absolutely.
know you're recording me. But with like a Jamie or with a granola, it's not as much in your face. And so for whatever reason, because that little thing isn't flashing at you saying record, people seem calmer. And so those are part of my tech stack as well. But yeah, so I guess it's kind of a mix between some stuff that, is evolving and some stuff is new. And to me, that's normal.
Yeah, no, it's great, and like, especially as you think both you're obviously a leader, a manager, and you're also doing the work as well, like customer research, that ability to like sit down with people and like really ask, like be in the moment talking to them and asking questions. Before it was like you could never do that unless you had at least 3 or 4 people there, where it was the customer, someone asking the questions, someone writing stuff down, and then someone observing what was being written down and asking the questions. And like that, it's an example, I think, of just like a little efficiency. Now, is it as good as 3 people there? It's up for debate. But it allows somebody like one of us to sit there and go really deep on those conversations. And then you have an audit trail, if you will, to go back on, to re-listen to the conversation, to capture notes, to highlight things, like that. For me, again, it's just a power of your ability to be a little bit more productive in terms of what you're trying to do with fewer people. And for me, again, like as you say, I can't live without those tools now. They're a huge part of what I do. And it's kind of funny then as well sometimes, because I'll be on calls with people and we'll have the call, and then literally like within 3 minutes, I'll be able to like summarize the call, the action points, the notes, have it in an email and send to them. And people are like sometimes a little bit freaked out. They're like, "Are you how did you get that email done so quickly? I'm still in another meeting." So there's again these sort of, for me and my method, that's a really important part for me, especially because we're in the studio, we're in a distributed team, people in different time zones. Asynchronous communications are imperative in a way, because they're the log of what we talked about, what the actions are. And I'm going to have to come back to this in 4 hours time and remember the thing I have to do, and hopefully get it done. So that ability to sort of audit and then recheck and then resend is like it's a huge part of my work method in the context I'm in. It's funny, how we use these little things to just, keep improving, as you say. I love that you're sharing like the tools that, aren't there. And Notion, again, I'm a huge fan. We use it to run a huge amount of the teams and products that we're on. But its AI is not there. There's no 2 ways about it, and it does make you start wondering, like, when is the tipping point, as you say, because you've invested the data is in this tool. But is there a tipping point where the efficiencies you're looking for outweigh? Great question. When does that happen? I don't know the answer to it either, but it's a great thing to think about because people are thinking about it.
But the thing you're bringing up as well, I think it's still like a balancing act. I mean, and I go back to, thinking about, next gen product management and product managers, not being the one who, pull all the strings. You need to have the engineers listen to the customers. And so I still think there's value in having multiple people on the call, because even if you give a recording or even if you give a transcript, it's one step removed. And so I'm hoping we don't lose those human connections, because hearing something directly from someone, seeing their, lean forward or their eyes, you get that in the video, but it's like you're watching TV. But if you can see the person as they're giving that insight, it's much more tangible, it's much more real. And I think that is critical for, all parts of the process, all the, parts of the product development process, to have that firsthand insight to really understand where you could dial things up or dial things down to make it better for their customer.
It is very easy to get lazy. It's easy to sort of just throw it in, ask the AI a question, copy and paste, spit it out onto the next thing. But that is not research. That is not like spending time to really understand things. it's lazy work and you're going to get poor outcomes from it, So it's just another great example for people to, again, find these edges of like, what's the appropriate amount of tech and human or human and tech, because that's the trick. The human plus machine is where the magic happens. It's not one in necessarily independent of each other all the time. And that's a fascinating space. So looking forward then, like this book, I'm super excited. It's out there. Like I would really encourage, everybody, whether you're new to product management, where you feel like you've been through 75 iterations of product management, as I was reading it, I was so many things I enjoyed where I was like, oh God, I remember that. And then, oh my God, I'm still doing that. It was actually a really fun and an insightful book to read. Like I really enjoyed it. So, for you then, like, what are you sort of most excited about, like looking forward about, what does the next generation of product management look like? What's standing out to you?
The pieces that are standing out for me are what's going to allow the next generation to become product managers. And because companies are scaling back, there's people who, can check all the boxes on a job description. And before, the job descriptions used to be these mythical things, but now you can find those mythical people. Yeah. And so when you talk to someone who is, graduating from school or has one job and they want to get into product management, it's hard because you are competing with all of these amazing people. But I think we need that next generation to come in because they're native in whatever it was when they were growing up. Yeah, I don't remember which podcast or newsletter, but it was, about Shopify, hiring a lot of interns and using that to be able to determine who is going to be, the people they hire. And I love that approach because you're giving people real world experience. Yep. You're giving them something tangible for their portfolio, and then you're increasing their likelihood they can get a job. And so I do believe product managers need to evolve, but that also means we need to welcome in the next generation to be able to bring their unique perspectives. And so I love it when companies say, we are doing this thoughtfully to be able to help give people that experience so that they can build things in the future.
Yeah, no, that resonates massively. One of the things, it's been a little bit of a secret sauce. I probably shouldn't be sharing too much of it on the show at Nobody Studios, but the ability, what we have found again and again and again is interviews, asking people questions is a total waste of time. What matters is actually giving them an assignment to do and working with them together. Yeah. And then they get to learn about, what it's like to be inside the studio or in the startup. And then we get to learn how they respond to that environment, and it's been amazing. Like we have a group of students from the University of Pennsylvania helping write our climate tech thesis. They're all like 2 years into university. They're passionate about it. They're a joy to work with. They bring me so much energy and but they're all like, oh, what is venture capital? I have no idea, but I like this. And they're like learning how to do these things. It's fascinating, right through, having folks who don't have even as you say, the traditional CV about building a business, and yet they're great at execution, super bright. You give them difficult problems to solve and they try and figure it out. And they're the people you dream about, but there's no way that resume, because maybe they're, an operator in an insurance company, doesn't fit with like, oh, you're a startup entrepreneur builder, but you put those people in the context, or as we say, put them in the arena, and they absolutely shine, and others don't. And, I think, again, as you said, it's creating the opportunities for people to find out on both sides of the equation it's been a real secret sauce for us. And I think I agree. It needs to be more almost of how we go about doing this rather than the sort of paper-based, where did you go to school? What was your last 5 jobs? Like, it just doesn't seem to make as much sense to me anymore.
No. And the other piece that I really love about Nobody is, again, your global approach, because that's the other fear with, The pandemic, we all went remote. Now companies are bringing people back. Again, I feel in some ways that gives you very siloed views where you could have more diversity of thought. You could have more opportunities for people who can't live in San Francisco, to be able to contribute. And I do believe that makes products richer, that makes product development richer. And so there are some things about this generation now that I'm curious about how it's going to play out, because we seem to be going back to some of the pieces that at least I'd hoped we'd move beyond, but they're comfortable and warm and cozy. So we've gone back to them, whereas we could have continued to have more representation of the population versus, again, just what we knew.
Great to have you on the show and back on the show. The book Next Gen Product Management, it's available now, folks. I would recommend go out, get yourself a copy. It's a fantastic read. Again, whether you're new to product management or you've done a few cycles like myself and Diana here, there's plenty of fun stuff to take away from it and learn. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's great to have you, and look forward to having you back again in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.